Hi all, a very interesting game in round one of the new FIDE Grand Prix just started, which is being played in Uzbekistan from October the 20th to November the 3rd. So the opening ceremony I think was 2 days ago. Yesterday was round one and Fabiano Caruana was playing Vachier-Lagrave. It's most of the usual suspects from the previous Grand Prix, but there are some very interesting players as well who weren't in the last one, including Jobova, who I'm quite a fan of actually. He has a very interesting style, original approach to openings, etc. So anyway, this game, Caruana playing white against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Vachier-Lagrave is a great, fantastic, dynamic player as well, who I find very interesting. Let's see what happens. E4. Let's actually take it from black's perspective and put on a kibitzer here. So Vachier-Lagrave played actually the Sicilian defence. So his opening statement, he wants a fighting game, dynamic, unbalanced. So after knight f3 we do actually get an open Sicilian. So knight takes d4, knight f6. Yep, the Najdorf, very popular. And now we see this move f3 being played. That's the move that was played. Other moves which are very popular in life, but bishop moving to e3 or g5, bishop e2. These are all quite popular as well. Fischer kind of system, bishop c4, Fischer Sozin, also f4, but f3 is up there. So we see an immediate e5 here, which is by far much more popular than e6. Black reacting quickly in the centre. And of course it does seem to concern the d5 square throughout the game. After this, you'd think structurally this is quite a big commitment by black to do this. The knight drops back, very theoretical to drop back there. Bishop e6. These are the main kind of moves played now, top moves, statistically, according to live book. So we reach this position, this kind of tabia, this start position for this opening. And again, here there's over 1500 games, 1600 with knight bd7. This was played, g4. So the theory is very well trodden here. b5. Now, usually players with white play g5 actually, right now, have over 1300 games in live book with that. Actually, 92 are only with rook g1, and rook g1 was what was played. So a very interesting choice. We're really going out of theory a bit with this rook g1. Seems to have a great deal of logic behind it from Fabiano to do this. To follow up with maybe g5, and then perhaps later the rook can even lift up later potentially, or just support, maybe just smashing through with g6 later. So how does black react? Well, knight b6, this has been played before over 50 times. Knight b6, and now we see knight a5. Two main choices here. It seems to be theoretically knight a5 or g5. Knight a5 was the move chosen by Fabiano. On g5, where there's 22 games, for example, the knight could go here. It usually goes to h5. Sometimes goes there, but for example here, like this, it seems this evaluation in this line is meant to be about equal. Just for those theoretically interested, this kind of thing can happen. So, yeah, that's kind of path. Could happen, but actually, yeah, this other choice, knight a5, and now queen c7 has been seen before 16 times. Rook c8, 15, that was chosen here. Rook c8. All of the play from both sides seems very, very logical here. White plays now g5, and the knight goes to h5. We see king b1. Okay, now here, usually in this position, black plays g6. There's a few games with g6. And the evaluation meant to be about equal. In fact, the engine evaluation is 0.00 on g6, as it is with queen c7. Knight f4, engine actually likes knight f4. That has been seen before in 3 games as well. Interesting idea to try and give up. Seems as though it's giving up a pawn. If knight f4 is played, let's see, just briefly, if takes, is there enough compensation here? apparently black would be totally winning this position with +3, funny enough. So it's probably an important theoretical note here. I think this is basically a loose piece. So knight a4 hits the loose piece, and it seems, what does white actually do here? It's also got problems with a2. So if takes, queen takes, and we're going to be on a2 here. This looks like a total disaster. Rook takes c3. It's a total disaster for white. So yeah, knight f4. You know, for example, like this, it's not very pleasant at all, with d5 and bishop a3 to follow, for example. So knight f4 is also really an interesting move in this position, but we see actually queen c7. So still we've got this potential loose piece to take advantage of. Queen c7 seems to, you know, bear down pressure on c2, and potentially it seems black might actually be threatening the move d5 here. If given an extra move, d5 might actually be on the cards actually if white is not careful. Just to demonstrate that here, let's say h4, d5, and it looks as though, does white have a hold there? But after e takes, knight takes, we're actually hitting that knight. So knight takes, bishop takes. If queen takes here, there's a more significant issue though than taking this one, which actually would favour white actually. The more significant issue is the skewer possibility with rook fd8. So that's why this is really embarrassing tactically. The rooks are not connected. So we learn that the rooks are not connected from this variation really. So that's probably one of the reasons why in this position white tends to play knight d5 here. Mind you, there aren't too many games from this exact position, but knight d5 is a good lockdown on d5. It's a typical like freeing operation. Just to see that again, you might think, well, what about bishop takes b6? Well, we have that loose piece issue. We just play this and we're on this. So this position here, apparently after bishop d7, is also very, very good for black. Say knight here, queen takes g1, there's a loose piece there. There's another thing to learn from the position. So this queen takes here, yeah, we're actually on two pieces there. So it seems, yeah, d5 is a major issue here. On takes bishop d7, we still got the double attack. So say knight e2, which is a double defense. Rook fd8. Apparently black will be doing great with bishop f5 to follow. So say knight b3, bishop f5. You can see how d5 has actually opened up this dangerous diagonal here, and this looks extremely awkward, this position, if this has to be played. I know we're going a bit far here, but just from a theoretical point of view, I think it's interesting to look at. Black now gonna get this pawn back at least, maybe. So yeah, so knight d5. Caruana keeps the lock and key over the d5 break, which queen c7 seems to imply might have been on. So it seals the hole in the position. But now, okay, black played knight takes d5. Yes, it looks to be, there's pressure on a5 here. But and after e takes, black tries to make, it seems, use of that with bishop takes d5. So on queen takes, we've got queen takes a5. Very sharp position. But white actually goes in for this. In fact, this is probably the best move. The other moves don't seem to be that good at all here. Apart from queen takes d5. Say bishop d3. The bishop just drops back. Black's just basically munched the pawn and it's going to follow through with d5. And so yeah, white played queen takes d5, which the engine suggests is equal here. So this grip on the light squares is worth a lot positionally. White continues with bishop d3. This knight's kind of loose as well actually in this position, and white's getting this huge grip, it seems, on the light squares. There's no, I don't think there's an immediately major threat facing black. Black played g6 here, although g6 from white looks as though it might be tempting at some point in the future, but for the moment it seems yeah, white's got a good grip on the light square. So g6 here was played, and now we see white playing c4. I think one of the ideas is to accentuate pressure on the diagonal and not minding even about the b file. So it seems a bit of an outrageous move in that surely, but there's a pin here, so c takes is not even possible. So I don't think actually it's not even possible to arrange b takes here anytime soon. So maybe not so outrageous actually. Actually white is just threatening to win a pawn with this, so he's just exploited that pin. So that's one of the main things. How does black actually protect that? If black humbly protected b5 like this, I think white's doing quite well here. Maybe just rook c1. Rook c1. And it's a nice grip on the position. You see that queen on the light squares central. I think, yeah, black's on the defensive here. Seems a very passive position. If the queen ever steps back, then white's just going to probably just take on b5 here. And so, you know, what is black doing here? So yeah, that seems to be a big light square grip. So the pawn sacrifice is a very interesting idea. This pawn sacrifice, this huge grip on the position, it seems, at this moment. Does black have any counterplay here? Well, Maxime played now knight f4, hitting the queen, asking the queen to leave. That's just taken after e takes f4. Okay, is there really enough compensation? Because black here seems to now have the idea of rook c5. By removing that bishop from c5, rook c5 could be useful for trying to liberate black's position soon. White actually now played c takes, a takes, and immediately got this pawn back with queen takes b5. So equal on pawns again. Black's structure looks a bit shattered. There's double pawns here, there's a backward pawn here. But I think it's now dynamic. There's dynamic imbalances going on with the opposite coloured bishops. One question is this pawn going to be weak later? We see this move which seems to be fairly accurate. The engine really likes this move that was played here. Queen a7. So I think queen a7 keeps an eye tying down this rook to that one. But also rook b8 could be quite interesting later to try and get some pressure on the king side. Or rook c5, maybe to double and put pressure immediately on g5. If this can be knocked out, then the bishop could come back here and put pressure down that diagonal. White played here bishop e4. Now here, although rook c5 seems tempting, there might be some possibility of queen just coming to b7 here, which is annoying. Black actually played rook c7, and it looks as though he might be interested in playing like rook b8 to start to put pressure on b2, and I'm wondering also if bishop f8 to g7 would really help black's campaign here. It seems entirely logical to use that b file, in principle anyway, if possible. We see now, you know, showing the grip on the centre, bishop d5. Now this kind of nuisance looking move is played queen f2. So it actually highlights a back row issue in white's position, because bishop takes g5 appears to be threatened, you know, because if takes, then check here, king moves, then back row mating. So we see queen b3 fending that kind of possibility, protecting the c2 square. And white seems to have a grip. You know, he's got a grip on b7, he's got a grip on b8. So how is it actually possible to use this b file? Was it more of a promise? It's a road without cars on it at the moment, that b file. And here's another road without the bishop pointing at the white king at the moment, this road here. If only this pawn could be eliminated, then this bishop could get on that diagonal. This next move, though, seems a bit materialistic in some respect, but why not? Queen takes h2 was played. Wow, just nabbing that pawn. Yeah, how is it actually punishable here? White doesn't seem in any great shape to punish this. The one thing white does have, though, it seems this bishop is not just, you know, making sure this is passive. It is gliding potentially this a pawn down to queening. White plays a4, betraying that long-term plan here. Maybe not that long-term, I guess. It's not too many steps away, but it needs to be supported at a7 at least. We see queen f2. And now rook c1 was played. Rook a7, as though that might be a target now potentially. Or maybe just to be blocked with rook a5 to try and put pressure on d5. Queen b4 stops any rook a5, if that was a serious concern. But now we see queen e3, and the threat is queen d3 check to pick up the bishop. It's a loose piece on d5 right now. So we see rook cd1 protecting that d3 square. So yeah, it seems as though black has nabbed an insignificant pawn, because there's always an en passant to use this h pawn. So white's got the pass pawn, black's got the double pawns. It's opposite coloured bishops. Is white's grip on the position really intense here? This is very interesting, because actually, okay, Maxime plays now the top recommended engine move, queen e5. It raises a question about this g-pawn immediately, because if we can take this, then we can return back here and put pressure on b2. And you might think, well, hold on a sec, can't we just kick this queen with rook e1? I think there's a technical concern here. I think it might be the check. Let's have a look. In the game, queen b5 was played here, which indirectly defends actually g5, because then I think we've got bishop f7 check to win the queen like this in some lines at the end of that. So queen b5 was played in the game. For the moment, let's also have a look at this for a moment. Well, then just queen takes g5, protecting the bishop. Okay, so we can't. We're not in a position to do that. So queen b5 indirectly defends g5. If bishop takes g5 now, then rook takes indeed, and bishop takes f7 would win the queen. So that's, I think, one main idea of queen b5. Okay, yeah, this bishop really wants to be on this diagonal for that b2. We see now king g7 unpinning f7 renews basically the threat of bishop takes g5. And now we see the pawn again protected with bishop c6 this time. Okay. Black now plays, though, rook c8. Now, this idea of doubling on that c file seems quite fun, to try and get a rook to the 7th. White does a prophylaxis move against that now in rook g2, it seems. Okay, now here the obvious move does seem to be to double here. That wasn't played, actually. Very interesting move was played from black here. For the moment, let's examine why wouldn't rook a c7 be played. Perhaps this is just a very strong light square blockade. If white took and bishop e4, there's a strong light square blockade with this a pawn, past a pawn potential on the cards. And if black has to do this, then maybe the prospects aren't particularly brilliant for black here. You'd have to get some passed pawns by playing this, and the prospects might not be brilliant here. It seems white might be in good shape here. So we see this alternative idea to rook a c7. Very surprising. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 5 seconds here. What would you play with black in this position? So 5 seconds to pause the video from now. Okay, d5, wow. It actually opens up this diagonal, which means I think rook b8 is a major resource all of a sudden. If we just demonstrate that, well, it was actually demonstrated in the game, actually. Bishop takes d5 was actually the game move. Let's just rule out some other moves then. Rook takes d5, check. Apparently this is good for black after queen e6. So we get that horrible pin there, we get a double attack. Well, we get the pin and we get c6 attacked. This looks as though this position black is doing nicely actually now by taking here and then carrying on with something like bishop f6, and he's also got the h pawn to start running as well. So I think that might be the idea there, the simple idea there, of getting that nasty pin on rook takes d5, and on queen takes d5, taking, and then just taking the a pawn if the bishop took there. And if the rook took, then the bishop's loose. We just take that. So in the game, after this surprising move, we see bishop takes d5. So the question to be asked, well, actually, the problem is the rook is actually sneakily defending b2. So no big deal with rook b8. In fact, although rook b8 remains one of the stronger moves recommended from the engine here, to play that anyway, but actually rook c5 is actually the top choice now from the engine perspective in this position. So putting pressure on white's pieces, white steps back, and it's now black takes the opportunity to nab the g-pawn. After all that, a protected tactical move there, d5, to sneakily win that g-pawn. But I think, yeah, what is more important, this bishop and battery on f7 here, which is actually protected by this one, or this battery here on b2. Interesting. From the engine point of view, black is really liked here. It's more than a pawn, 1.60 nearly. Bishop c4, bishop f6. We finally get this dream battery on b2. So it seems Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has created a fantastic counterplay now with black. Not only that, this battery is also, of course, now got his h-pawn as well, potentially, without any en passant tricks. We see rook e2, check, rook e4, and now black actually doesn't mind putting pressure just here. This is nice. And now just takes off on e4, funny enough. White took with the rook. If he takes with the pawn, in this position, apparently there's a nice resource. It seems black is doing well with either queen e5 for a specific reason, or queen a5, which looks like a nice double attack. But the idea here is not to nab the pawn necessarily, but just go back here and threaten things like rook takes a4 with that battery on b2, and also, of course, e4. So that's a nifty idea, but actually it could also just be played immediately here. So with the idea of rook takes a4, and if okay, what does white do here? If bishop b5, then g5, and black actually does have two connected passed pawns here, which could be a serious concern after this and this. For example, emphasizing that the pawn here is blockaded whilst black's pawns are running down the board. So Caruana, he's trying to keep control of the position. He doesn't want these pawns flooding him on the king side. He plays rook takes e4, but it's clear black is having a lot of fun all of a sudden. And now we see rook e7, not minding a transition potentially further into towards an endgame. And now we see queen d7. Okay, so this pawn versus this pawn. We have a transformation again. This light square bishop versus the dark square bishop. It's symmetrically a bit poetic here, I believe, the imbalances. White's next move, shows content to destroy his pawn structure. White plays queen b5, offering the double pawns. Black could have refused this, apparently with queen d1 check, and that's still good, but it's more complex, you'd think, to play like this with the queens on the board. But it seems the prospects are well in Black's favour from an engine point of view, that this kind of position, if White doesn't play bishop c6, I mean h4, this is, if White plays like a5, this is dangerous, this h4 business. For example here, there's an immediate blockade on the dark square and attacking b2 again. This battery is exceptionally useful here, where Black's pawn seems to be virtually decisive actually compared to White's. It's just quicker in this scenario. It's winning. We queen here, and then we're going to mate the White king after. We're going to first like mate in 2, for example. So this kind of scenario seems very bad, even with queen d1. But the simpler queen takes b5 was played, so wrecking White's pawn structure. So they're basically almost like worth 1 pawn now if it can be blocked via bishop d4. So the blockade b6, and now Black's pawn is ready to run, and it's actually really awkward with that pawn stopping any defense. This bishop has to like wriggle energetically to stop the pawn now, potentially, or the king needs to come round there. We see White voluntarily giving up his b pawn immediately with b6. You might think that's a strange decision. If the bishop plays here, now here, f5, say like this, g5, this is a bit similar to the game actually, where it seems Black's going to get horrible pawns. So we might as well have a look at the game continuation. White voluntarily just gives up the pawn here and plays king d1. And we get this with the Black pawns coming down after g4. It does seem fairly horrible for White, this position. Black is threatening just h4, and let's have a look. Let's run this through. White resigned here. Caruana actually resigned in this position. Can he do anything? I mean, as an example, I think Black is winning with anything here. I mean, h4. We just play h3 check, and I mean, isn't even just g3 winning here? If White has to defend like this, it looks fairly hopeless. I mean, we can just get a Zugzwang here. Actually, we can run White out of moves to get a Zugzwang. White will have to give up this one. And if we take here, bishop takes h3, apparently there's some tricks. So even stronger than taking there. There's another idea instead, to give White another move and to actually take when it's here. So in this position, where there isn't a stalemate trick on this diagonal, so the bishop takes h3 is not working, then it's all over. So that was the little finesse the engine comes up with. So yeah, I mean, it looks winning, but there might be 1 or 2 tricks like this. Yeah, this classic stalemate trick. After so that was quite amusing as an idea, that actually you don't want to take the pawn here. I don't know if that's actually still winning for Black even, this position. So if it takes here, stalemate. If here, this position, I wonder if it's actually... Anyway, this wasn't tested, but there's no need for Black. Black can probably get the king around there and still... But I don't know, it's actually looking like a fortress draw. The engine evaluation isn't changing. Might be a fortress draw there actually. So yeah, but with that little trick of taking on b8 rather than on b6, yeah, it should be a straightforward win here. So the position was resigned around here, king g5. Fascinating game. So it shows the Sicilian defence is still a major weapon of choice, the Najdorf. Very, very popular still. If you want a dynamic imbalanced game, this is a great example, model game perhaps. So white seems to play a positional pawn sacrifice for a light square grip, not minding this temporary loose piece to play c4 later. So not only getting a light square grip, there's that pin on the b pawn here, very advanced stuff. But yeah, black's play, very interesting, not minding the double pawns. I mean, what else does black do though if he didn't do this? That seemed to I know it seemed wretched, but what does black actually do? If he plays like this, maybe he's just going to get thumped on the king side later, or maybe white just picks up the b5 pawn without any problem. I think that control of this diagonal is important to white, so playing this knight f4 is a nuisance to damage white's dart square control. So even when white gets that pawn back, that c5 square was later a useful pivot to put pressure on white. But this nabbing the pawn here, I don't know if this could have been avoided. If h3, then still there's this bishop takes g5 trick that was mentioned, sorry, for queen c2, the back row. So yeah, white had to sort of fend off for that. So he did end up losing that h pawn. But it seems, intuitively you might think, black's not got any passed pawns here. White's got central control and light square grip. The a pawn looks dangerous. It's just funny though, the engine kind of thinks black's fine here. I think there's some latent king safety issues, and also just basically loose pieces around here, meaning that rook a5, if black ever gets that, then that's going to be great. So white had to seem to tend to very specific tactical issues and concerns here, like losing the g5. So he's tactically defending with the bishop f7 resource, but eventually that is lost. This is, I think, the move of the game for me at move 33, this d5. Yeah, even though white is protecting b2, it's got a lot of interesting ideas to it with the c5 square in some lines. So white played like this, and we saw this, basically black winning that g5 pawn, was then able to create the beautiful battery on b2 and face these endgames with greater optimism because of the passed h pawn, much greater optimism. So winning that g5 was strategically important, not just for the battery but for the h pawn. And black's blockade potential on the dart squares here is stronger than white's blockade potential. There's a whole mass of pawns over here. When white's pawns are now doubled, it's a bit pathetic. Yeah, I mean, why did white give up this pawn? I don't think there's much better to do here in any case. If the king had just gone here, apparently bishop e3. And what is white actually doing? Black's going to be playing like f5, and this is just getting in the way of the bishop actually to play king d3. And if like king d1, I don't think this is not particularly inspiring either. This kind of position where white has to scramble to stop this h pawn, and then I think just black continues with g5, coming up with it looks as though just g4 should be enough. This position just seems incredibly passive, but white, I guess, has to be concerned about any potential fortresses here. If we just have a quick look at this position here, this kind of fortress, this might be something to avoid actually. Yeah, no, that's not how to play it. This is although it's like +3, I don't think there's any progress being made here. That's a classic opposite colour bishop fortress. Forget that. Rewind here. In this position, I think we've got to make progress in other more subtle ways. If we bring the king round, so we'll bring the king round without playing g3. Bring the king round over here. I don't know. There could be trouble here. I feel the evaluation isn't changing enough. So maybe, you know, this was interesting. Black has to be careful the way he wins this position. There is clearly some opportunities here. Yeah, it seems strange to give up that pawn there. Yeah, but it is a bit grovelly. Sorry, if we just go back to this line here, this is a bit grovelly. I wonder if there's any key improvement here. In fact, there is. Pardon me. If we reach this position, there's actually a +10 evaluated by the engine here, not in h3. What we'd actually do here is g5. Now we have to avoid a light square grip. I think this does it, because now we play g4. Okay, and what is white doing? Okay, let's just give a move. Okay, h3. Let's put the bishop back somewhere. Can we make progress with the pawns here? Probably we can now bring the king to h4 and then force g3. So we'll do this. We'll just bring the king over here. Now surely it's simple, we just play g3. That's the simple way to do it. No light square blockade. Yeah. Okay, pardon me for doing some workings out there. So it's interesting that the b pawn was jettisoned in retrospect. But yeah, as long as black avoids a light square blockade, this is going to be winning. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.